Tonight, interest rates heading down again as America's top banker makes another cut. Moves to loosen the bank's grip on credit cards and reduce their fees. And in the wake of the floods, ecological crisis on 3 North Coast rivers. Good evening, Richard Moorcroft with ABC News. Also coming up, 8 inner Sydney schools to close, and one of Sydney's new generation ferries runs aground. But first, Australia looks set to follow the US lead with another cut in interest rates. Anxious to avert a recession, America's central bank has reduced official interest rates for the third time in as many months. And with Australia's economy expected to remain weak for most of the year, Australia's Reserve Bank is predicted to do likewise.
US Federal Reserve Chief Alan Greenspan has cut rates again, an aggressive attempt to put spring in the step of the floundering American economy. US authorities dropped official rates 0.5%, the third cut in as many months, citing faltering world growth, a slump in manufacturing and falling stock markets.
Over half of the financial assets that Americans own are basically in the stock market, and a big chunk of their overall net worth, including their homes, is in the stock markets.
Share investors hoping for a bigger reduction sent the Dow Jones Industrial Average plunging to a 2-year low, leaving many Americans contemplating losses.
I'm probably down about 25%.
With small investors, who are also consumers, downcast, the Federal Reserve signalled it's prepared to cut rates again.
I think they'll continue to do it until they're quite convinced that the economy is recovering.
And authorities here won't need much convincing to cut interest rates again early next month. The latest reading of future economic conditions from Westpac suggests the economy will remain weak until well into the second half of this year. The Reserve Bank is expected to follow the US, reducing the official rate to 5% with a cut of 0.5%.
Well, certainly there is not an argument at this point in time to suggest that the Australian economy is doing any better than the US economy.
The Reserve Bank began putting up interest rates in 1999 to combat inflation. With another cut in April, most will have been reversed with unprecedented speed within less than 3 months. And 2 new board members could be involved in making the decision, at least one of whom may come from regional Australia. Philip Lasker, ABC News.
Credit card charges may be about to tumble to the benefit of retailers and consumers if the consumer watchdog gets its way. The ACCC has called on the Reserve Bank to regulate the so-called interchange fee banks charge each other for processing credit card transactions. The Commission also wants to allow new providers into the credit card market.
The ACCC's main target, the interchange fees between banks on credit card transactions. $600 million a year gets invisibly charged to merchants in service fees, and consumers end up paying.
The banks charge one another this fee, and then they regard it as a cost.
The interchange fee is about 1% of the value of the transaction, for no more than an electronic entry. The ACCC believes the banks are profiteering.
The $600 million appears to bear very little relationship to the costs of processing that transaction.
The profiteering charge seems to be taken as read.
I'm certainly all in favour of any action being taken to prevent the banks charging fees they oughtn't to charge.
Belatedly, the banks have talked of making some concessions, but not enough for the ACCC. It wants the Reserve Bank to designate a payment fee, maybe half the going rate. Again, Prime Ministerial support.
Well, I think the Reserve Bank should look at all the powers it has.
Consumer groups like it, though with some concern that the banks will push up charges elsewhere.
So we're calling on the government to be sure that they have a comprehensive overview of all the fees that consumers pay, so we don't see this same exploitation happening in transaction accounts and other fees.
Retailers also support a plan to open up the credit card market to non-banking organisations, meaning potentially some big retail organisations or utilities.
At the moment, with the profit levels that the banks are achieving on these, what business wouldn't want to get in there?
Don't expect any dramatic changes too quickly on charges or competition. The banks are wedded to the credit card companies which have resisted all change and which are multinational.
The fate of the Australian consumer is irrelevant in their calculus.
Today, the banks are not commenting. Jeff Sims, ABC News.
The axe has fallen on 8 inner Sydney schools, victims of a slump in public school enrolments. In a revamp of inner city education, the state government says it will also establish new secondary colleges and single-sex schools.
In 20 years, enrolments at inner-city state schools have collapsed by up to 44%, with parents attracted to the private sector, single-sex and selective schools, leaving others to wither away.
The public vote with their feet, and they've been voting some inner public schools down by turning their students away from them.
And at 8 schools, the welcome mat may not be extended for much longer. Among the high schools to be shut down, Marrickville, Maroubra and Vaucluse. Alexandria, Waterloo and Redfern primary schools also on the hit list.
Those schools basically are schools which have no future.
Hunters Hill and Vaucluse sit on prime real estate. Their disposal will net millions for the government, which promises the money will be spent expanding other schools in the area. To help combat the drift to private schools, the state government will, for the first time in 15 years, open new single-sex schools. That plan will see Balmain High become a girls' school for years 7 to 10. Boys will go to Leichhardt. Glebe High will become a co-ed school for years 11 and 12. Other inner west schools will merge. But early reaction to the plan is hardly encouraging for the government.
We see the successes and the achievements here being broken up and mucked around with.
Parents, teachers and the community will need to be convinced that we're not simply seeing a fire sale of public assets.
The opposition says the government has already condemned the schools on the closure list.
What the Minister has done today is to sign the warrant which says that school has no future because he's decided. How dare he? How dare he?
The plan is now open for public comment. Ben Wilson, ABC News, Sydney.
Up to 70 passengers escaped injury when a Supercat ferry ran aground in Sydney Harbour this afternoon. The Susie O'Neill crashed into a private pontoon in Kirribilli as it was approaching the wharf. Passengers were transferred onto another vessel. The ferry has since been pulled free of the pontoon and the Waterways Authority is investigating the incident. Only last month, the ferry Collaroy ran aground near Manly Wharf. The deaths of thousands of fish have forced authorities to declare 3 rivers on the north coast of New South Wales off limits. The environmental disaster has been caused by recent heavy flooding of the waterways.
Dead fish swept out of the flooded rivers and piled up on the beaches. The extent of the losses impossible to estimate.
This is a disaster, the worst of its kind in 50 years.
The New South Wales government responded by placing a fishing ban on 3 rivers for the next 3 months. All have experienced huge fish kills in the wake of the floods. Rotting vegetation in the floodwaters draws oxygen out of the water, and the fish simply can't breathe.
They're dead on the beaches, they're dead on the edge of the river. Even in the mangroves here, you just can't see them all.
Phil March, a Macleay River fisherman and an environmentalist, is quick to point the finger.
I place the blame solely with poor agricultural practices. We've drained our wetlands. They used to be the lungs of our estuaries. Now they're nothing but a death trap for our fish.
Fishing communities on the north coast will be hard hit by the ban, but on the Macleay River at least, it's a welcome move. The professional fishermen not only support the closure of the river, they lobbied for it to happen in a desperate effort to preserve a future for their industry here. It's hoped that the moratorium will allow fish stocks to regenerate. In the meantime, the New South Wales government is asking for federal help to get fishing communities over the tough times.
They don't have income. So we're asking the Commonwealth Government to come forward with income assistance because they do need to continue to pay their mortgages.
But the long-term environmental cost can't be calculated. Paul Lockyer, ABC News.
The ALP has increased its lead in the Ryan by-election as officials check votes counted so far. Labor's Leonie Short is now 157 votes ahead of the Liberals' Bob Tucker, with just 800 votes left to count. A tense standoff continues in Papua New Guinea tonight, with the Prime Minister still refusing to speak to mutinous soldiers in Port Moresby. 3 groups of heavily armed troops are involved in the revolt, sparked by government plans to reduce the size of the army. Yesterday, they rioted when the Prime Minister, Simakeri Marauta, failed to address them at a rally.
No open confrontation today, but also no progress towards ending an increasingly complex standoff. Behind the Murray Barracks fences, angry soldiers were gathering, but the demand for a meeting with the Prime Minister was again refused. As the standoff continues, Port Moresby's people are becoming increasingly nervous.
If you are currently in one of the trouble areas, then we recommend you to do your best to avoid contact with any large groups.
Security companies are now broadcasting situation reports to their clients every 30 minutes. After yesterday's riot at Murray Barracks, security at Parliament has been stepped up amid rumours it too will be targeted. The Catholic Church has reminded the soldiers of their true calling.
Your job, according to your constitutional duty, is to serve the country and to serve the government of the day. Well, this is contrary. This is contrary to what you're supposed to be doing.
The uncertainty here appears to be encouraging groups with other axes to grind. The danger is they could further inflame the situation. The Murray Barracks standoff continues tonight with no end in sight. Negotiations are continuing in the hope of finding a compromise, but it increasingly seems that more decisive action is needed to stop this crisis escalating. Richard Dinnan, ABC News, Port Moresby.
The government of the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia has given ethnic Albanian rebels 24 hours to withdraw from the country's western region before a full-scale offensive is launched. The government is refusing to negotiate with the insurgents, and on that score, it's got the support of the European Union security chief. The ABC's Heather Hewitt reports from Macedonia.
For the first time, we see the ethnic Albanian rebels' hideout, tucked away high in the hills above the city of Tetovo, near the Kosovo border. And for the first time, we hear the guerrilla leaders' demands, but we're not allowed to show faces. Even if it means we fight to the last soldier, we will enter Tetovo, says this commander. We want to separate the Albanian part of Macedonia and create an independent country. That goal continues to threaten the stability of the entire Balkans region. And now the European Union has sent in its foreign policy chief, Javier Solana, to help the Macedonian government deal with a crisis that's spinning out of control. His message for the rebels:
one has to separate completely the violence activities from whatever reforms have to be done in the country. Let's be very clear on that. Nothing can be obtained through violence.
So both sides are digging in. Despite the flurry of diplomatic activity here involving international heavyweights and the Macedonian government, there's still no breaking the stalemate. Instead, the Macedonian forces have pounded the hills with more mortar and machine gun fire, with no obvious effect, as the rebels move closer to the city they hope to claim. But in a last-ditch attempt to stem the battles, the Macedonian government has issued this ultimatum. Its forces are prepared to stop attacking for 24 hours if the rebels stop firing and consider surrender. Heather Hewitt, ABC News, Skopje.
There are fears of an environmental disaster in the South Atlantic after the world's largest floating oil rig finally sank. Salvage crews have been battling to keep the platform afloat for the past week after a series of explosions badly damaged the structure. 2 crewmen were killed and 8 are still missing. It finally succumbed overnight, sinking with 1.5 million litres of oil on board. Ships have been sent to clean up oil which is beginning to float to the surface. The captain of a US nuclear submarine which sank a Japanese trawler last month has accepted full responsibility for the accident. Commander Scott Waddell told a Naval Board of Inquiry convening in Pearl Harbor he had made some honest and well-intentioned mistakes. His submarine rammed into the trawler, killing 9 people as it demonstrated surfacing techniques to civilians in the control room.
I am responsible for the actions that led to the tragic collision and sinking of the Hime Maru. None of my crew members should be accountable or responsible.
Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihiro Mori and relatives of the dead travelled to the site of the accident to lay flowers. Space. may be the final frontier, but not, it would seem, for the fare-paying passenger. NASA has vetoed plans by a wealthy American civilian to join the next resupply mission to the International Space Station. The cash-strapped Russians want to take him along for the ride, but their American partners say space isn't ready for a tourist.
The man who wants to be the first tourist aboard the International Space Station is a 60-year-old Californian. Dennis Tito has offered the Russian space program $20 million. A former NASA engineer, he acknowledges the need for extensive training.
This doesn't come by writing a check, getting a ticket and stepping on an airplane. It takes a lot of work.
But when he arrived to start training in Houston with 2 cosmonauts who are scheduled to launch next month on a Soyuz rocket, NASA said no.
The international partners were all concerned that the presence of even a thoroughly trained but non-professional at this particular point in time would make nominal operations untenable and emergency operations even more dangerous.
With Mir about to meet a fiery end somewhere over the Pacific, the dispute couldn't come at a more sensitive time. There's concern that the cash-strapped Russian program can't afford the Soyuz flight without Dennis Tito's money. And Russian officials are still considering putting him in the 3rd seat on their rocket over NASA's objections. The first commander of the space station, American Bill Shepard, flanked by 2 cosmonaut crewmates, offered this careful assessment.
I think flying people such as Mr. Tito is a good idea, but I think NASA is also right in saying that they need time to work with him to make sure that he's ready.
At the same time, his replacement, new Russian commander Yuri Usachev, seen here with Australia's Andy Thomas, says he wouldn't mind Mr. Tito hitching a ride. The Soyuz launch date is April 30. Negotiations continue. Craig McMurtry, ABC News.
Back home now, and Commissioner Peter Ryan has warned his police officers to expect unprecedented attention and unwarranted criticism as a result of the Police Integrity Commission hearings. The inquiry today heard the Commissioner ordered an internal affairs inquiry into why the head of the reform unit changed his home telephone from Telstra to Optus.
On January 29th, 2 months after Ken Seddon was sacked by the Commissioner, Mr Ryan directed the head of his internal affairs unit to investigate why Mr Seddon had transferred his home phone to Optus. Giving evidence for a 3rd day, Commander Mel Brammer said his investigation revealed nothing untoward and no further action was taken. Mr Brammer said he was also instructed by Mr Ryan to check whether Mr Seddon had used the Police Commissioner or his office to negotiate a rental agreement. Mr Brammer said the investigation again proved no misconduct. On Monday, Mr Brammer told the inquiry he had concerns about being asked to pursue these additional matters. In December, Mr Brammer's detailed report of an investigation lasting several months found no proof to sustain allegations of misconduct by the seconded English police officer, Superintendent Ken Seddon. Despite the finding, Mr Brammer later wrote to the Greater Manchester Police of Mr Seddon saying he was not a great ambassador for either of our services and certainly tested the waters close to criminality. In a message to police officers across the state, the Commissioner said while the PIC inquiry continues, there would be unwarranted criticism of the service, but he promised to reverse that with a public campaign. In a memo yesterday, Mr Ryan said he would not be diverted, however many distractions are put in his way. The inquiry has been asked to investigate allegations of a witch hunt against pro-reformers in the police service. John Shovlin, ABC News.
Stung by criticism from Premier Bob Carr, supporters of Sydney's Museum of Contemporary Art have rallied in support of the MCA collection. Recently, the Premier said visitors could be embarrassed by the modest collection. But last night, big crowds turned out to see the works selected by 7 prominent Australians.
Called MCA Unpacked, it's a new take on some of the museum's 7,000 Australian and international artworks.
It's come from people who are not within the profession. I think that's what gives it its edge.
People like author Drusilla Majeska, dancer Graham Murphy and fashion designer Akira Isagawa. Among his choice, this 1970s suit by German artist Joseph Beuys.
Actually, the felt as a fabric had a large
dominant fabric within my winter collection, so I thought it was the right inspiration for me.
Although planned 9 months ago, the exhibition is timely. In the debate about whether to replace the MCA building, Premier Bob Carr has been less than flattering.
You might be embarrassed by the mismatch between the grandeur of the building and the modesty of the contemporary art to be found in it.
We shouldn't be trying to emulate other museums. We should be building something that's very specific to Sydney and Australia.
Filmmaker Jane Campion found much to admire, including the work of Arnhem Land artist John Mwangel.
Sounds very limp to me to criticise a collection, nothing much, worthwhile. I mean, paintings need to be championed and to be loved.
The opening of the Unpacked exhibition has been like a call to arms for supporters of the Museum of Contemporary Art. It's attracted a huge number of people, many of whom haven't been here for years. MCA Unpacked is a free exhibition on until June. Anne-Maria Nicholson, ABC News, Sydney.
And the Art Prize season continued today with the unveiling of the winner of the satirical version of the Archibald Prize, the Bald Archies. The award this year went to this portrait of Federal Minister Amanda Vanstone. Entitled Scase Chaser, the painting by cartoonist Eric Labiki depicts the former Justice Minister's fight to extradite the former Quintex boss from his Spanish hideaway. Another notable winner, a depiction of the Queen and her corgi, who bears a striking likeness to the Prime Minister. The contest received more than 40 entries, with Olympic and sporting celebrities proving popular targets. Now, business and finance, here's Philip Lasker.
Thanks, Richard. Ansett has all but completed its acquisition of New South Wales regional carrier Hazelton. The airline has gained more than 90% of Hazelton shares, allowing it to mop up the rest. Hazelton shareholders who have already accepted the $1.60 per share offer will be paid this week. The takeover was cleared by the Competition Commission earlier this month. Now let's take a look at share trading, and the Australian market held up well despite the sell-off on Wall Street. Falls were marginal, with losses restricted by interest in the insurance sector and selected resource stocks. News Corporation dipped to its lowest level since early January, and most banks fell on fears the coming federal election may see politicians promising tighter controls on their operations. BHP lost further ground as the positive sentiment surrounding its merger announcement begins to fade. But Woodside Petroleum rose on unsourced media speculation that the federal government will approve Shell's move on the group. Overseas, the Nikkei posted its biggest one-day gain in 2 years on expectation that the yen's decline against the greenback will boost exporters' profits. Major commodities have eased, oil to just above $26 a barrel, and the cut in American interest rates has lifted the Aussie dollar against a weaker greenback to just above 50.1 US cents. And that's the day in finance. Richard.
Thanks, Philip. To the cricket now, and India holds the upper hand on the fourth day of the final test in Chennai after yet another Australian batting collapse. Trailing by 110, Australian openers Michael Slater and Matthew Hayden put on 82 for the first wicket. But Hayden's dismissal triggered a mini collapse as India's spinners again did the damage.
India managed to stretch its lead past 100 thanks to some lusty hitting from the tail.
Well, that one's hit straight down the ground.
The final pair added another 21 runs before Miller trapped Kulkarni in front to end India's innings all out for 501.
My immediate reaction was benefit out to the batsman, however.
Michael Slater quickly made Australia's intentions clear as he took to first innings destroyer Harbhajan Singh.
Down the track and in the air.
At the other end, Matthew Hayden picked up where he left off in the first innings as the opening pair went after quick runs. Slater, who's had a miserable tour, took to the spinners with gusto.
Well, Slater's hit that well.
But Hayden wasn't to be outdone as Australia whittled away India's lead, going to lunch at no wicket for 69.
Hit well, and it'll clear mid-wicket easily.
Eventually, it was Kulkarni who made the breakthrough when he had Hayden brilliantly caught by Zahir in the deep.
It's a great effort. What a catch. What a catch.
In a bid to push the scoring along, Steve Waugh promoted Adam Gilchrist to number 3. But his horror run with the bat continued when he fell to Harbhajan for 1.
Very, very tentative. positive he was. That's that.
Slater soon followed, giving Harbhajan a record 26th wicket for the series and swinging the match firmly back in India's favour.
And Australia have lost their third wicket.
Nick Johnston, ABC News.
Australia's leading fashion designers say there'll be plenty of glamour about to brighten the winter months ahead. And they're confident the new season look will sell, despite the dollar's woes and talk of a recession.
Glamour is the look for this winter season, according to designers here and overseas. They're tempting shoppers with lush fabrics and sophisticated styles, inspired by the 20s, 40s and 60s. The big names in Australian fashion are confident their wares will sell, despite predictions of an economic slowdown or the impact of the dollar's slide.
It's bad in a way that, most designers import their own fabric, so therefore their fabrics are going up. And, all of our fabrics, we're having to recost. So, that's where the problems lie.
The extra cost will have to be carried by the consumer, but it's not all bad news. Australian designers continue to do well overseas, where they're now even more affordable.
Look, for export it's going to be fantastic, and because we've just sold our 5th collection overseas.
And their work is applauded for more than just the price tags.
I think Australians are very good at making clothes that you can wear.
Wearable clothes are also the focus of Melbourne's Fashion Festival, which is aimed at moving clothes off the rack and onto the street. Kathy Swan, ABC News, Melbourne.
Let's see how the weather's looking now with Mike Bailey.
Thanks, Richard. Good evening. Well, a gusty southwesterly change should bring a real touch of autumn to many districts tomorrow. First tonight, though, our weekly check of the El Niño monitor, the Southern Oscillation Index, and it's down 3 points, still in the region associated with above-average rain. Well, a few showers fell around Sydney today, with cloud ahead of the change, and temperatures went from 21 to 26 degrees, just slightly above average for that maximum. Canberra 15 to 23. Air pollution in Sydney was low. It should be similar tomorrow. High tide just before 20 to 8 in the morning, 1.5 metres. Sunrise at 1 to 7. The temperature now 22 degrees in Sydney. That's right on the average. Relative humidity 77%. The wind is a nor'easter at 20 kilometres an hour and the pressure falling. Now the forecast. There's still the chance of a brief shower tonight near that change, possibly even a storm, but then fine for tomorrow with lengthy sunny periods. 17 to 27 degrees near the coast, 16 to 27 at Liverpool and 15 to 28 expected for Richmond. Around the main centres today, some readings were a little cool in the south of the state as that change started to make its way through, a top of just 15 degrees today at Albury. The rain was scattered across the eastern half of the state. The top to 9 this morning, Woolbrook with 53 millimetres and Gunnedah had 24 millimetres in the 6 hours to 3 this afternoon. Temperatures overall from 6 at Thredbo this morning to 30 degrees at Casino this afternoon. For tomorrow, some of those temperatures in the south of the state starting to warm up a little after the initial impact of the change, but it will be slightly cooler in areas further north. Katoomba looking to a top tomorrow of just 20 degrees. There'll be some rain and isolated storms in the northeastern corner tonight, but contracting out fairly quickly. Cooler west to southwesterly winds right through the state and a few showers with a chance of storms about the south, but also contracting east fairly quickly early tomorrow. For the ACT, cloudy with a few showers, but contracting to the ranges tomorrow, 10 to 20 degrees. Should be fine on Friday and mainly fine Saturday. That reflects the chance of another change moving through around the middle of the weekend, but in the meantime, cloud ahead of the one crossing New South Wales now, already moving up to the northeast of the state. The synoptic chart dominated by that front and cooler change and a low pressure cell near Adelaide. That'll move away more to the southeast tomorrow and the winds should ease somewhat behind it. The outlook for Sydney then is mostly fine, certainly that way after the chance of any rain overnight. A couple of days of fine weather, but the chance of unsettled weather by late Saturday and into Sunday. So much for the outlook, but if you're looking out for the Mir spacecraft tonight, it is likely to be visible in the northwestern sky just briefly at about 8:29 tonight, and it'll appear as a slow-moving star, likely to be in that region again tomorrow night. Richard.
Thank you, Mike, and that's the news to this minute. From me for now, good night.